Universities were created to be a forum for open discussion, not only to teach, but to discuss, to have the best ideas coming out, so you have a better life coming along. Now, increasingly, universities are closing down. They're closing down their minds. Speakers are shouted off public forums because students may not agree with them, or in some cases, students are hurt by that idea. Sabrina Maddeaux is a columnist with the National Post. She joins me right now. You're closer to universities than I was, but a number of articles are being written about the fact that university students who are graduating are very woke, very politically correct. They don't know that much, and they don't like to listen to anything that is different from what they are thinking.
I think this is a big challenge facing universities. It's a question of walking a very tricky, to be fair, fine line between celebrating diversity to encouraging equality, but also encouraging freedom of thought, freedom of speech. These are very important.
Why is that a fine line, Sabrina? Because, you know, I mean, everybody agrees with diversity, and no one agrees with racism. And, you know, we should have discussions about that. But why is it a fine line to be able to say, you know what, we are against these things, but if you want to talk about it, that's great. And also be talking about this at the same time where we can move forward.
I think where the fine line comes into play is things like what speakers they host on campus. So on one hand, I absolutely agree. You should expose your students to different political ideas, all sorts of perspectives. But at the same time, when a university is hosting a speaker on campus, on some level, they are endorsing and sometimes paying for that person's views. So that's where we get into a more tricky spot.
Well, there's no question. You know, freedom of speech is to be jealously guarded. And so is supposed to be thought is, you know, like hate thought and terrible, terrible thoughts. But maybe that's your fine line. But then do you not think, though, that recently the balance is going the other way? We are closing down any discussion on universities.
I do agree with you. I think that some of the things like trigger warnings over classic literature have gotten out of control. Ultimately, we need to create people who can exist in the real world. And in the real world, you have to deal with differing perspectives, some of which may offend you. That's life. And if universities aren't churning out students who can deal with that, they're not doing their job.
Well, it was in King's College in London the other day. I had to send an apology to all the students and faculty because they showed a picture of Prince Philip. And people were hurt. Like, we don't like this. And so, I mean, are we really bringing up a whole generation of crybabies, of sissies, of people who say, well, I don't like that idea, I don't like that picture, so I don't want to be exposed to it?
I do think there's this idea that anything that makes you feel bad or sad or hurt these days is wrong and should be canceled. And that's not correct. I mean, you're going to encounter things in life that make you feel that way, and that's part of the human condition. So I do think in some ways we've swung too far on the pendulum.
The show will bring it back. Sabrina, thank you very much.
Thank you.
3 minutes. Our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, recently stood up in the House of Commons and prefaced his remarks by saying, and we will only work from the facts, quote, unquote, and then proceeded to lie by saying Britain was in a horrible, horrible third wave, trying to show, in fact, that Canada was not the worst in the world. Britain, though, had vaccines. Canada did not. And this was not reported in the mainstream Canadian media, the media paid for by Justin Trudeau. All of which, I'm telling you, is that it's important to have this 3-minute interview. Please subscribe, ask your friends to subscribe, and press that PayPal thing so we can continue on to bring you the news you otherwise might not know.